to Hannes Brummer, to the STORTKOP Confession Show. Hannes Brummer is one of South Africa's best, most amazingest comedians, actors, and recently also a lecturer, as far as I know. We're going to learn more about Hannes now, but welcome also to all the viewers who's watching STORTKOP Confessions. Hannes, thank you so much for joining the show. It's such a privilege to have you here. The last time that we actually saw each other, I think, was 20 years ago, more than that, at Takis, when I attempted studying drama. I met you guys there, you and Malt and a few others. I also distinctly remember you were in Mupani Kosais, ne?
That is true.
Yeah. And more than anything, the biggest memory I have of you is Zev Sketsa, which was you and Tian, Niels, Marley, and Adrian, eh? Zijn naam Adrian, Marley.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys, they were together for the viewers to know. They were together in this amazing comedy skit that they put together. They were like rock stars for comedy. That time. We were groupies of Zev Sketsa. It was one of the best comedic acts I've ever seen in my life. I missed it vandaag nog. But anyway, Hannes, without further ado, please tell us about your career, where it started, everything that happened, everything they want to say. Go for it.
Hi, Alreen. Thank you for having me on the STORTKOP Confessions. I'm looking forward to our chat. So I mean, you kind of pointed out that I studied drama at Tikkies, finished in 2000. So it's been a while. But in a lot of ways, I'm grateful for being able to say I've got the experience that I have now, rather than being the naive guy who just walked into this industry. And I mean, and I'm sure we're going to get around to it as well, but this COVID insecurity fortunately reminded me of what it was like starting out in this business. So there were ways that you adapt, I suppose. So I studied drama at Tikkies, fresh out of varsity. I think I did what a lot of young actors do. I did schools programs and the like, and kind of a lot of what I like to call training wheel theatre. In some ways, it's more difficult than any other theatre because kids are such an honest audience. I was fortunate enough to, right at the beginning of my career, getting a very nice television role in Schoenlapper. So I got some camera training relatively early. And then you pointed out Zevsketse, which was a show we created originally for Kaka and Ka. The initial name was Opa Losa Harde Poep. And then we adapted that to Zevsketse. Which was a sketch we did at Oudtshoorn for the festival, and we lost all our money, and it didn't go particularly well. But when we came back, we had friends of ours that really wanted to see it. They were like, you're our mates. And so we started this weird kind of thing where we took what already traditional theatre based in Afrikaans. And we started doing gigs at local venues like the Nile Crocodile, and our association of the website Wat Kyk started. And somehow we ended up doing a couple of Oppie-Koppies where, we opened a Sunday afternoon at the little stage for the Easter Festival. And subsequently, when they had the festival in 2003 in Pretoria, we had our own venue for the premix part of the festival. And Zevsketse itself kind of, Marley, Niels, and Tian were my seniors when we were studying, but, just they're family to me now, 20 years on. And that led to us doing a television program called Blikskottel, the lesser watched Blikskottel, which is also kind of sketch-based. And ultimately, that took us, when we were around 2005, 2006, we did a sketch sitcom for SABC2 called Complex, of which we did 2 seasons. Marley and Adrian subsequently immigrated. So that called a halt to that movement. And we had a lot of fun times with that. And the idea that we were creating a lot of this ourselves, learning firsthand. Marley was our producer, so she was kind of gaining those skills as well. We were all in a writing room together, and I think my love for writing kind of started there, but it was only cemented later. Apart from the team, you know, I was working as a freelance actor.
Yeah.
I found my way into a few, you know, of these Kykenet shows like Amalia, and I did my runs on, you know, story arc runs on soaps like Villa Rosa, Benellanders, and the like through the years. And I've always been a character actor, and more specifically, uh, comedy. I mean, I've always kind of, I wanted to be Hamlet, but no one would ever cast me as that. So
Okay.
I suppose I
Yeah.
became obsessed with comedy, and writing a lot of comedy, you kind of start to go, oh, this is a bit of a science. And if you, once you're really obsessed with comedy, you kind of, it's difficult to not try and figure it out, because it is this mysterious genre in some ways.
Yeah.
So always more cast in comedic roles, so bit parts in television things. Somewhere along the line in 2004, I did my first Afrikaans farce, then for Cuckoo Productions, but with directing by Pierre van Pletsen, who really kind of created a love for the farce genre, and especially the Afrikaans kind of sex comedy genre as a player. And I've done 5 or 6 of them through the years.
What is that? Sorry, I have to ask, what is it, fast genre? What is it exactly?
Farce.
Farce.
Well, we would call in Afrikaans klug.
Klug, ek hoor jou.
You know,
yeah,
so which is essentially, it's usually based around a male character looking to cheat on his wife with a friend who acts as a foil, who has to try and hide the lie. So needless to say, new characters fill into the situation the whole time, leading to misunderstanding. So farces are usually determined by the amount of doors on stage. So it's kind of slamming door theater, you know, as one person exits, another walks in, and everybody's trying to hide from each other. And it usually revolves around kind of, you know, sexual infidelity and trying to hide that. I mean, it's a broader kind of sphere than just that, but we know them as these kind of very popular Afrikaans plays. My vrou se man se vrou, and my boetie se sussie se ou, and my tannie se oom se tafeltennispartner, and you know, those kind of plays.
Okay, awesome.
And I love them. I mean, and I was lucky that during the 5 or 6 of those plays that I've done, you know, acting with people like Toby Cronje and Hannes Miller, like real masters of their craft and of the genre. And then I suppose my career diverted a little bit.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, daar. Listen, we're gonna just carry on. All the viewers, we had a little interwebness problem, but we're just gonna carry on. So, Hannes, where were we last? We spoke about us. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think I made mention that I've been doing a lot of Afrikaans plays and, you know, X amount of Afrikaans television roles.
Yes.
I've always done a lot of theatre and festival kind of shows. Specifically through the years, I've done a lot of work. I like moving around in crews, or, you know, kind of associating with the same group of creative people. So I've done a fair amount of stuff for the writer and director Chris Forster through the years as well. Plays such as Buurtwag and Manne, and the Cabaret, and quite a few. I really consider Chris a mentor to a large extent, and I just love his writing. And he always picks characters that where I have to wear the tightest little pair of shorts or the ugliest t-shirt. He really loves to embarrass me on stage. But I think where I was also kind of getting to was an important diversion in my career. Was in 2005, I joined it was an audition through workshop process, and subsequently I joined Joe Parker's Improv Express, which is an improvisational comedy troupe, specifically short form improv, and the best reference for it is Whose Line Is It Anyway? So we were doing shows pretty much weekly at Carnival City, and I kind of got a little educated in improv comedy, but I was spending a lot of time with stand-ups. So you know, the bug kind of finally hit, and I started to do open spots, which is 5-minute unpaid stand-up spots. Until you kind of build up material and time, and you are, you know, and the quality of your material is good enough to get paid. And then, you know, I became a stand-up, which I, you know, I was just so thrilled by the immediacy of it, the adrenaline rush of it, and the idea that it is my singular voice. You know, it's my opinion on the world. I mean, it's quite an arrogant genre, to be brutally honest. It's like, look at me and laugh at the same time. But the idea, and kind of coming from a slightly more conservative and Calvinistic Afrikaans background, this idea that I can say what I want to, yet I still have to be responsible with those words, you know, it really appealed to me. It's kind of like, I think it was there that idea of, you know, I can be an entertainer and a little bit punk rock at the same time in you know, trying to raise issues. It really, really struck a chord with me. So I started doing stand-up, and things were a little bit quiet on the acting front at that stage. So stand-up kind of temporarily took over.
I see.
And the circuit is predominantly English.
Okay.
But I found myself with my comedy partner, Malt, who you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
We started a little Afrikaans thing called The Flying Dutchman, which is a combination of improv and stand-up. And we were trying to kind of advocate an Afrikaans circuit, which there aren't really enough comedians for. However, I'm glad to see that, you know, someone like Skulk is really kind of running with Afrikaans comedy. I'd like to think we planted the seed for it, but it didn't exist as a genre really in Afrikaans at that stage. So we kept on doing it in English and on the English circuit, and had some great gigs through the years. And I did a show with Skulk and Casper de Vries, another hero of mine, around the late, you know, 2010s, 2013, around there.
Yeah.
Kept doing plays. I think I started to write a bit more. So I started to write a little bit for television. And, you know, just kept freelancing. You know, I think it's interesting for me that as an entertainer, I'm always very wary of using the word artist when I reference my body of work. You know, I mean, it's a lot of things, but it's not art. But there's always been this need to diversify, to stay alive, because you're freelancing. So you know, I've always done a lot of voiceovers and a little bit of dubbing and acting in plays and trying to do things with my friends as little independent kind of productions. But at the same time, I'm also a slave to the audition machine. And if my agent notifies me of an audition, I'll go and I'll do it, and I'll take the job. Comedy allowed me a little bit of a movement into kind of the corporate function environment as an MC or as a comedian, although I've never really done a ton of those. But also when I started to do comedy, and this is where you'll also remember me from, I think I got a little bit entrenched in the Pretoria band scene. So a lot of my friends are musos, so I started MCing, you know, rock shows, and that kind of fed the stand-up and vice versa.
Yeah.
And now in the last 2 or so years, or 3 or 4 years at least, I was lucky enough, I got a lead in a Kyknet sitcom called Elke Skewe Pot. We did 2 seasons for that. But with the same production company, Rouse House Productions, I worked as a performance director on a show they had called Die Kasteel, which is kind of a filmed farce.
Yes.
And got an opportunity to get a little bit of camera directing training as well. So I started to veer towards directing, and that's something that's really interesting to me, specifically kind of multicam directing. So working with 3 cameras, sitcom style.
Yeah.
I did some directing and script writing for Afrikaans music program, Kyknet Nou Top 20.
Yeah.
And I trained as a director with Die Kasteel. But thanks to my association with Rouse House, they cast me in Elke Skewe Pot. I was fortunate enough for the 2nd season of Elke Skewe Pot. I won in 2019 the SAFTA for Best Actor in a Television Comedy Series.
Wow.
Wow. So that was
Congrats.
a little bit of, it's weird. You win an
Fantastic.
award and you think, oh, I'm just going to work all the time now, but that's not the reality of it. No, I don't know. Maybe people think it was either a fluke or I'm too expensive now, but it didn't make that much of a difference. No, and then I think the last big project worth mentioning is, before I suppose we get to kind of how I survived in COVID was
Yeah.
I was assisting Andre Odendaal as a director on the first season of a SBC2 sci-fi sitcom called Die Vleende Springbokkie.
Yeah.
And for the second season of 26 episodes, so it was essentially season 2 and 3, I came on board as head writer for the show, and also subsequently directed 5 of the episodes. So I suppose that's kind of where we were. We were in production. We were kind of almost done with the writing process when COVID kind of hit, and then we were able to shoot in July. So we were delayed for almost 2 months before we could continue with the show, which is one of the things that COVID gave a few people here and there that they don't realize, is that it bought us all a little bit of time on a few projects. In this case, that was it. And currently, doing a little bit of everything. I'm writing again for SBC2 comedy project that's still, in development phase. I teach twice a week at Oakfields College.
Yes.
Where I'm teaching the musical theatre students some practical acting classes and doing some improv workshops with them. And I enjoy that tremendously. If only because I've spent some time in this business, and on the one hand, to kind of hand over some of the knowledge I've gained, but on the other hand, for me to teach is reminding me of a lot of the basics of performance and acting. And it's kind of reinstilling a love for performing. Although the opportunity to do so is a lot less these days.
Exactly.
And that, in a nutshell, that's my career.
Amazing. Thank you for laying it out so nicely, because you must also understand, the viewers, please understand that this is now episode, I think 16, I can't remember even, but right in the beginning, I just asked people, just tell us about your career. But with Hannes, I specifically, because I realize people are too modest. They think, oh no, I'm going to sound vain if I say, but it's important for people who are listening to this, especially people who want to go into the industry, to really understand exactly what it entails, all the kinds of jobbies that you do over a span of 20 years, to understand that it's not a one-dimensional thing. And I want to stay in this space a little longer. I want to, well, first of all, there's 2 things that I'll start with. Firstly, where did your love for drama and your passion come from? Why did you decide, you know what, I want to study this, I want to go into this full-time and actually invest in an education within drama? We're having a small freeze again here on Zoom. If we have to stop, we're going to have to do that. Let me just have a look and see if my internet isn't dying. Hi. Thanks for your patience. I gaan Zoom fire hoor. Guys, ja. ons was geontzoom vir 'n rukkie. But we're back. So I'm just going to carry on. I'm going to pick up where we left off. So the last thing that I said was that, so Hannes, thank you for sharing everything, giving us a proper overview of your career, because people really need to understand, what it entails. I just told the other guests in the beginning, just tell us about your career, give us an overview. But now by episode 15 or 16 or whatever this is, I think, it's important for people to know really what you've done. So I wish I also told the others, please just don't be modest, give us the detail. But anyways, so what I wanted to say, this is the question. Where did everything start for you when you were still young? I guess, tell us, did you realize, you know what, I can make people laugh, and this feels so good to me when I do this, I want to do this for a living? What made you decide to go and study drama? Give us that background also.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a difficult thing to describe, in the sense that it's almost like I just always knew, or that sounds like the cliched answer, but I think there was certain, it's that nature versus nurture kind of element, I suppose.
Yes.
My mother was an English teacher. So from a very, very young age, I was running around the rehearsal space because she directed the school plays. Yeah. So I was in that environment and kind of enamored by it from a very young age. But not only that, even in the creche, they do the yearly little concert, and I I think my first real performance was as Die Boer in Die
Ja.
Boer in sy plaas.
Oh.
En I was Noach in the Ark. And I was the wolf in the Three Little Pigs, which was my first villain role, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yes.
But I also knew all the words to Leon Schuster's Swim, Jannie, Swim, which became like a little kind of a party trick, so all the teachers always wanted to hear that. So I think, from an incredibly young age, I was used to the space of performance, or the fact that I can get some degree of attention by performing a little bit. I think as time progressed, and with my mom being an English teacher and an avid reader, being around and surrounded by language, both Afrikaans and English for that matter, I think this realization that language is an incredibly powerful tool, kind of continued into high school when I discovered rock music, and specifically kind of punk, and I started to make the connection between my expression can find a form, or someone else's expression, and the use of language can be connected to ideas communicated to other people's. But at this stage, I didn't know that was a discovery I made in retrospect. It's like, I was fascinated with that from a young age. So I obviously did the school plays, I did debating, I did, public speaking, all those kind of school activities. But I think it was, and then I just loved American cinematic comedy. I loved Jim Carrey, because that dates me a little bit, but I love Jim Carrey, and I loved Wayne's World. I watched that film over and over and over again. And then, when I kind of started at 8 and 9, it was the beginning of Tarantino's career, and Pulp Fiction and Natural Born Killers, and those kind of, controversial and dark films, but with this keen sense of humor. Yeah. So I think it kind of, the humor element started coming there. I tried to make friends by doing Ace Ventura impressions, and and somehow it all started to combine into this desire to study drama, to become an actor. Yeah. And I think I was lucky. I had kind of a gap year after matric, where I would spend a year in the UK as a Rotary exchange student. And that solidified it to me. As I was introduced to specifically British culture and British comedy and British entertainment, it really solidified the idea. So I ended up begging my parents, listen, I've been doing this shit from a young age. Yeah. Let me just, and I think once I started to study drama, it changed again, a second round. I was enamored with kind of the more circus arts kind of stuff. I juggle, I loved mime. I loved the physical theater element of it. And that started to direct things that I never knew would happen later, but gave me a skill set, so that once I started to really discover and actively research comedy, I already had a little bit of a background in specific styles and genres that I never knew at the time would become useful, but it somehow did, Yeah. Exactly. So I literally can say it's been a lifelong kind of passion of mine. Yeah, that's the thing. Being a musician, I enjoy so much speaking with you, because I'm comparing or using the mold of my experience as a musician to what you experienced, and I think it's probably the same for everybody. As we grow up, we absorb certain things that speak to our souls and personalities automatically, and then we see others' reaction to what we do, and then we go, okay, cool, this is cool for people, I love doing this, and then you just carry on, and it takes you down different avenues, meeting different types of people and getting different types of response, and based on that thing, that kind of motion, that circular motion, you keep on doing what you're doing. I suppose it's like putting a band together kind of thing. The people you meet along the way. I can recall with Zevskets, we had this kind of interesting kind of dynamic where I would often spend time editing scripts and kind of trying to shorten things. And Marley was always, kind of, apart from being probably the most clever of the four of us, 5 of us at least. She had this knack for the administration. Niels is just the idea guy. I mean, you always have to hold Niels. And that's where I can make things smaller. Niels comes with
Yeah.
17 pages of
Yes.
stuff. And
Yes.
Tian is almost the kind of the straight man, and he's got this great musical influence.
Yeah.
So it is, without you knowing, you're going to form this relationship creatively with people.
Yeah.
Everybody slots into where they should as a direct result of their influences or where they come from. And I find that that's an incredible kind of journey to find those people and to find those, ideas.
Exactly. And it's interesting. I spoke to Tian and Eloise. I think they were in episode 2. And it was just so beautiful to see, Tian and Niels are such close friends still, obviously. And that you're saying you guys are still friends after
Yeah.
all these years. I think,
Yeah. We're
yeah,
family.
yeah, it's like family, no? Yeah, so that's where your passion came from. And then Zev Sketsa, what is so cool about it, you guys were literally like comedy rock stars. How many people can do that, can go and merge with the rock scene as comedians? And there has to be some form of attraction for the crowd and the audience in both those mediums to go to Oppikoppie and see it's a music festival, but hey, we're going to enjoy this just as much. I think the absurdity of it and the bigness of it was what stimulated people. It's like you need to have fun while you're looking at that. You have to
Yeah.
enjoy the
Well,
craziness.
I mean, getting older now, not that 42 is old, but I mean,
Yeah.
I do miss that vigor of my early 20s, which is what
Uh,
Zevsketzer was. I mean, we
yeah.
were young, dumb, and full of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't think about, there are lines we can't cross, or, we just
Yeah.
went, this is funny to us. And we had like a set of rules, and we argued that if it's funny to us,
Yeah.
then by implication, it's funny to at least one other person. And if it's funny to one other person, then by design it should be funny to 10 people, and then that number grows exponentially. It was always offbeat kind of comedy because we were offbeat,
Yeah.
and we look back at the television stuff that we did then subsequently, like Blitzkuttel was really wacky, and we got Pluto Panousis as another contributor to the show, and because it was
Yeah.
initiated by a guy called Jan Volmerans,
Yeah.
and it was perhaps a little bit too wacky. But we were young enough that it's okay. We don't care. We'll explore it. And
Yeah.
then later you go, this is more an alternative crowd comedy. So by the time we did Complex, we could temper it a little bit without losing that wackiness,
Yeah.
but temper it a little bit and make it more efficient and more streamlined. I
Yeah.
think that's something that comes with age, is the ability to streamline. But you sometimes lose that faith in the first idea because
Yeah.
you're going, no, we got to do this and consider this. I
Yeah.
miss that kind of vibrance of creation. Yeah.
I see. And I think to add to that, you've done so many things behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, different genres and everything. You grow as a professional by doing all those things, but you also need the wackiness. It starts. It's literally a growth process. To be able to be a director and a writer, you have to have the insight to do it. And where do you get that insight from? Is from doing everything that's not structured and that's not labeled, and you just go through it. It's the same with music.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ultimately being willing to acknowledge it as a learning process or curve, to actually
Exactly.
afterwards do the analysis of, but what did I learn from this?
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just going to start blindly doing it because it's an occupation.
That's it. And you are a teacher now. You are in that space to be able to communicate to people now how this actually works. It's a completely different pair of shoes that you have to put on to teach. And that brings me, yeah, yeah. You wanted to say?
Oh no, I just wanted to say, it's like, but I related to what I know, and teaching to me is a bit like directing in a certain way, especially if you're literally teaching students to act, to listen
Yeah.
to each other, to react to each other, going back to the basics of acting. It is, you're right, it is a different kind of, it's not a completely new pair of shoes. It's just you change up the laces a little bit.
Yeah. That's a good description. And you were saying when we spoke earlier that during the pandemic, I'm just going to jump in between because I'm going to say what opkom hier. You went back to that first love of acting through teaching, and during the pandemic you started lecturing now. So you just gave us the background for where everything started for you, and the passions that you experienced as a child growing up, going into studying, and Zev Sketsa that started. Um, how much, like, if you can just elaborate on why you have gone back to that space, what made you get a new appreciation for that during the pandemic or through teaching?
Well, I mean, the teaching was literally someone phoning me and saying, "Listen, we're in a spot of bother. Would you contemplate teaching a little bit?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, sure." I mean, this is a bit of a more recent kind of development for me, you know.
Yeah,
Um, but through the pandemic, you, when the pandemic kind of broke, I was in the slap bang in the middle of a writing process with Die Freelance Actor, and I was just kind of taken by the fact that we all thought it would be so much sooner. It would be over so much sooner. You know,
yeah,
it's like 2 weeks and we're back to normal.
exactly.
And then
Yeah,
the moment it dawned that this is a more long-term kind of thing,
yeah,
you try and figure out, but okay, first off, how am I going to survive? I was lucky. I knew production would go ahead with Freelance Actor. I knew I would be directing on the show, and we still had quite a bulk of writing work to do. So
yeah.
that should keep me going for quite some time. But I immediately had cancellations. I immediately had to consider no more festival productions. And I was with the Arts Festival, I'd like to do 2 or 3 things. So if I've got a play that I'm involved in, you know, I'll also try to book a stand-up gig or MC a stage or something like that. And then you go, oh,
Yeah,
wait a minute. So now that's definitely the big festivals gone, you know,
yeah,
Aardklop, KAKNK, Innibos, Woordfeest. They're all, I think we still had Woordfeest in 2020, you know.
yeah.
So, that takes away a certain amount of performance time that I have.
Yeah.
Then no more stand-up gigs. And the funny thing is I was almost moving a little bit away from club stand-up, you know, where you're in a lineup of comedians. You do, if you're closing the night, you do 20, 25 minutes. If you're emceeing it, you end up doing a bit more time, but you're there kind of for the night. It's a social
Yeah.
environment. But I was starting to move away from that because I'm a parent, and lifestyle-wise, it gets
Yeah.
a little bit. So I've done 3 one-man shows now,
Yes.
which is kind of a little trilogy, you know, Punk and Pluckies, which is kind of about my rebellion, but the fact that I'm a very lazy anarchist.
Okay.
Then Visio Papa, about the birth of my daughter, and then Amper Out, about turning 40.
Yeah.
So now you go, the pandemic comes, and the capacity to do these kind of shows or create new ones, it's taken away from me. So I think the fact that you know, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the ways that I returned to the desire to perform.
Yes.
Having now recently the opportunity to teach, made me realize that desire to perform is not just because I don't have the opportunity. It's
Yeah.
because I have a profound and a deep love for performing. I
Yeah.
think that's how I correlate the teaching, making me go, I want to act. Because I think teaching is a performance in a weird way as well.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm trying to make Gen Zs laugh, and they don't have the same sense of humor as I do, or that my
I know.
references are too old. But then I go, well, no, this one's going to get you guys,
Yeah. You
because I
can't.
believe, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, a
You can't do.
likeness in a lecture room.
You can't do Ace Ventura for them. They're gonna go.
No,
What?
they're just
What?
going to go, what?
What
Yeah,
do
I'm
they?
shocked sometimes that references that I think is quite modern, and they just go,
Yeah.
no disrespect to the young guy, but
No.
he's a really nice student. But I will share this as I taught, I do the monologues, individual kind of work with some of the third years at Oakfield.
Yeah.
And the guy brought in, it's an opening sequence from a Jim Steinman production.
Yeah.
And there's a reference, then I you know, because I'm a bit of a rock trivia fan, so you realize that this particular reference
Yeah.
is from a song, The End by The Doors.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me blankly.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I'm like, The Doors, you know, Jim Morrison? Nothing.
Nee, hulle weet nie.
And I'm like,
Nee.
oh, good. Yeah.
It's so
and I'm
weird,
worried
yeah.
that they don't care. You know, I'm worried
Yeah.
that they don't care. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was young, I was listening to music from the 60s and 70s with ease, you know,
Same
because I
here.
wanted to, because it was kind of
Yeah.
It's the same. Maybe it is a time thing, because those 60s and 70s rock songs were a little kind of rebellious, even in South Africa, because we weren't allowed to listen to Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Yeah,
So maybe
exactly.
our generation really kind of, it struck a chord for us, because it was these things that we weren't allowed to listen. Now it's so open and free. You really got to know what you're looking for if you're looking for something to change your perception on life. Yeah.
Exactly. That's so true.
So yeah, I mean, I can't deny that the pandemic, like, really, like, taking away the opportunity to stand in front of an audience. I didn't realize it at first, because I was doing a little bit less of it, but it stung. That stung more than anything else. I mean, there's obviously this survival element that comes with it, but people doing online stuff, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well.
Yes.
I got involved with a few online things, and I don't know if it's the same for musicians, but because I suppose a song is a song in the sense that you play it through, a joke, I am dependent on that laughter between every single line to dictate my rhythm, my attack. I always say comedy is not a monologue delivered, it's a conversation. I speak, you laugh. It's a transaction thing.
It's reciprocal.
And I mean, suddenly feeling like you're just trying to tell jokes and to avoid was horrible. It was unpleasant to do,
Yeah, completely unnatural. It's like standing in the shower making jokes. You're gonna laugh at it, but there's nobody else to laugh at it. Yeah.
Well, they might laugh at it. You just don't know if they
you just
are
don't
or
know.
not.
Yeah, and absolutely, your delivery will be different, because, like you're saying, it's a reciprocal thing. It like goes like this, and you do need it.
Yeah.
It is like, and I wanted to ask you about that, because we could easily go into online concerts. For us, it's easier in that regard, but also to get a response after a song has been delivered, and that's important for us. You know what, this stuff, it's not going to go, the next song won't go down here, let's rather do that one, let's do that. So it's easier to lose an audience if you can't do it live. And the adrenaline also. If I compare it to recitals at universities or competitions, now people could record themselves, send in the video, it's a fantastic performance, but still, for you to be able to get onto a stage in front of a live audience, that's a skill in itself. That's a mental exercise that professionals have down. They've learned how to do that. That's part of the job. So I wanted to ask you about that, So what other avenues did you take? I think I remember you were part, or you're still part of Platform ZA. I have a flashback of that.
Yes. So this is pretty much a year ago since Platform ZA was launched. So I was so when the pandemic started, like I said, I was fortunate enough to have kind of writing work and a bit of directing stuff. But I immediately started. I'm good friends with Griffin from the website Wat Kyk. So we were immediately trying to, he's got a little recording studio. So I do a lot of voiceovers for corporate clients that he has and that kind of thing. And so we were kind of hanging out a lot and trying to figure out ways, because everybody is doing the kind of, moving towards an online thing. And then I became involved with Platform because Christian Belot, who's one of the head honchos at Blonde Productions, they had this idea for Platform. He started speaking to me about kind of the content. Initially, it was, let's do a recorded one-man show, something like that. And then by some design, I was talking about, and he knows Gifford, and, we started to talk about the idea. So I was ultimately involved in three productions on Platform, the one being Stroom, which is a short 15-minute music kind of, so you'll have two bands. We finish it off with them playing a duet. I do a quick interview with them. I'm essentially the host of the show.
Yeah.
We did Maskos, which is a talk show that I had some of my favorite comedy friends, and we do a little bit of improv, and it's basically a talk show kind of thing. And then the last thing that I was involved in was purely as an actor, however, and that's when because I do think that in terms of the online stuff, we've got to see the pros and cons of it. I mean, the con, it's a compromised environment. We're all doing this because we're panicking and freaking out about how we're going to continue doing what we do, and that means that no one's really figured out the recipe to perfection yet. The
Mm.
pros are we have a much greater idea of how that recipe works now in terms of distribution, in terms of the money stream, but also in terms of how to create the content. So the third I was involved with on Platform ZI was Feeskantoor, which was 10 8-minute episodes of a sitcom written by Chris Forster, which is a small
Yeah.
town that hosts its first arts festival. And we are
Okay.
very hapless in what
Okay.
we're doing. And I mean,
Yeah.
that was an incredible experience. Chris is such a fine writer, and he got myself, Kim Klute, and Karen Wessels to kind of play the leads. We pulled a lot
Yeah.
of favors, and every South African actor that you can think of kind of made little cameo appearances. And we
Awesome.
shot, I think it was something like 112 pages of material in 3
Wow.
days. But we
Yes.
rehearsed beforehand, and Chris worked very cleverly with 2 cameras so
Yeah.
that it felt like a stage play kind of in how we moving from one room to the next. And he had such
Wow.
experience working with Seven Elan and multicam production for so long.
Yeah.
And it was the most fun I had had on a set in a long time.
Wow. Dit klink
And that
amazing.
showed the innovation that we are capable of because of the online kind of stuff.
That's it.
With Platform, it's also, like I say, that little recipe in terms of, you know, it's a big decision you make is how do we distribute this? Is it, you know, you kind of pay a registration fee on a monthly basis, like a subscription? Do we
Yeah.
make it pay-per-view, which is the option they took? Or is it free and you try to get the money from advertising?
I
How does it
see.
get back to the artists and the production team involved? How do we
That's it.
recoup the costs? And that becomes tricky. And everybody goes, well,
Yeah.
this is what we think is the best model for it. And then
Yeah.
afterwards you go, because I mean, once I was done with Platform and, you know, I worked quite actively with it, you know, I kind of stepped away. I was a creative on it, you know, although I
Yeah.
had kind of a production element involved in Maskos and Stroom.
Yes.
You kind of step away. So you can't say with certainty how the company is doing, but they're still advertising, they're still around. So it
Yeah.
must in some capacity. But you say pay-per-view pricing becomes tricky. What is your end game? To get as many subscribers as possible, or it is to
Yeah.
get revenue from the subscribers you've got? It's all these decisions you
Yeah.
have to make. And I think people are
Yeah.
still figuring that out because we can't compete with it, Netflix or whatever. You know,
Nee.
and then I think that was tricky where we saw, and I think Muso saw initially, whether it was on a donation basis or through Quicket, you know, you saw big numbers initially, and then they
Yeah.
started to taper out because people saying, well, we saw a show last week.
Yeah.
Why are we going to? But then in the same light, you've got what Tian and Eloise were doing with their Dag
Yeah.
Dat Dinkie. They're
Yes.
not getting any revenue from it, but
Yeah.
they're constantly gaining new fans for it, you know.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
other people, I think, you know, your bigger bands, your Van Cokes and that, they figured it out to make quite a bit of money. Yet they know they can't do a show weekly. They have to, you know, kind of stretch it over, you know, once every 2 months or 3 months. So
Yeah.
that's what I found tricky in the online kind of space is figuring out what is the best way to go about it. Because I think the fact that it exists really excites me in the sense that it forces people to do things quicker, lower their production costs, and to get the hook, to improve the quality of the writing and the performances. It's extra important to have really good writing, really good songs, really good whatever it is that you are kind of putting on. You know, it's got to be. And then also something that Griffin and I discuss frequently is, you know, we're tired of seeing the oak perform, and I'm looking up his nostrils, and it's recorded on his iPhone, and it sounds shitty, and it's lit badly. Is to try and with what I've got, how can I make it look as good as possible? You know, those are all things we learned in the last year that we never knew we needed to know.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think it's a question of how quickly we can learn and how quickly we can apply all this stuff. And then there's technology that comes with it, and the internet, and you think of all the people who don't have the tools that they need to do this.
That's true.
You know, it's still a weird situation, but everything that you just mentioned is kind of new information for me. Like I've never thought, especially since you mentioned, how do you determine the pricing? Are you going to get revenue from it? Is it about awareness? Is it about gaining fans? How does this thing work? Yeah, so we're all still figuring that out. But yes, amazing. That's fantastic that you've done all of that. Rara, geluk.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun. And that
Mm.
was the other thing is to kind of keeping in mind social distance rules and how many people
Yeah.
are allowed to be in the studio,
Yeah.
to just have contact with people,
Yeah. Exactly.
and everybody's got the same kind of goal here. No,
Yeah.
we're not, I mean, obviously money comes into play because we have to survive, but
Yeah.
it's also about creating, and everybody's got the same agenda. The
Mm.
agenda is
Mm.
we want this to work.
That's it. It's simple as
That's
that.
something that I think, we took for granted previously.
Yeah.
I've worked for producers who had their own agenda and their own
Mm.
relationship with broadcasters, and broadcasters perhaps with agendas, and artists that were actually doing this to open another door. And I'm not saying we live in a conniving industry as artists, but I think a lot of that dissipated. That I wouldn't say the dishonesty isn't completely gone, but I think there was a point where we were going, listen, we're all in this together. We have to figure it out.
Exactly. And that's what's great about it.
Yeah. I still miss the contact though. Even now,
Yeah.
I mean, we're in limited, I went to go watch a band at the Jar Bar the other night, and it saddened me that they're only allowed half their patrons in, and there's a sign on the wall that says last round's called at 7:30.
Yeah.
It
Makes no
saddens
sense.
me.
It really,
How do people, now we can go back to live performance, but it's still a compromised one.
Absolutely. I had a gig a few weeks ago at Ferry No Backpackers here. The gig started at 5 p.m. on a Friday and had to end at 8 p.m. And now the deal is there that you make money from the bar. So now you have to try your best to let everybody get extremely drunk before 8 p.m. Before 8 p.m., you need to be, and then you have to go. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And also there was a show here at the Arts Theatre. Arno Karstens had a show here a few months ago. And it was just so weird to see like 40 people in the room at the Arts Theatre, because that's what's allowed. But then Arno gave an amazing show. It was still up there. It was fantastic. And that's part of professionalism, not to let it get to you. But it's the point of doing this is to gain a following. And with only 50 people in the room, it's like, you've had... And he had to compromise so much. He only had his drummer and him and tracks. Normally he would have a band. So it's a lot of compromise, like you said.
Look, I mean, I think as an artist, as a creative person, I think it hit me harder the whole pandemic. I mean, there's that frustration in not being able to perform, but seeing there are avenues we can take and ways we can continue to survive. I think no one is in denial of the psychological effect of the pandemic. No one is. However, I do think we don't acknowledge the length of the duration of it, potentially, as even when we get out of it, entirely, and we're done. There's these little knocks of confidence that it brought about. That kind of got to me a little bit. And I know I'd speak to people outside the industry while we were in the midst of the pandemic, and they were saying, oh, this must be exciting for you. You've got time to write and create. And the truth is, I didn't want to at times. I did the work that I had to do, and even that came at an immense price. It was difficult. In comedy, I believe, comedy breeds comedy. So you go and test material in front of an audience. Mel Miller says we're the only people who get paid to rehearse. So if I could go out and go deliver the jokes and test the jokes and find them out, I lose the desire to create them at home because they don't feel right. And it becomes, and then in my case, it definitely started infiltrating my capacity to work and my productivity. And I'm already a bit of a procrastinator. It just kind of worsened in the pandemic. And then even now, we're back to gigs, but it's still a compromised gig. So I think that's that psychological effect, that loss of faith in my own creativity,
Yeah.
that was something that really stung, even more sometimes than the financial implications. It's just, I'm struggling to be creative. I'm struggling to come up with new ideas. So
Yeah.
if I do get a chance to perform, I'm probably just going to rehash some old stuff. I
Yeah.
think that's where it hit me almost the hardest.
Yeah.
Is that loss of, you know, self-esteem, I suppose, or
Yeah.
confidence, you know.
Yeah. This is what so many people has said in these interviews. Like, why am I doing this? It was all fun and well in the beginning, and everybody saw it as a lovely little holiday. You know, I'm going to be creative. I'm going to work. I'm going to record my next album because I've got time. You know what? We're going to do this thing. And then the stop and go motion of the pandemic, stop and go.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. All right. Now we've learned that it's not cancelled, it's just postponed. But still, the bigger question remains. The bigger question remains. We don't have a concrete place that we can work to or know how to work towards to get back to the normal way of doing things. We don't know what that looks like yet. Sure, there's this online thing, but it's compromised, and still it doesn't make sense. This is not supposed to be how a comedy show is written. We can't do a stand-up comedy like this, sitting at home writing. You can't. So yeah, I completely understand that and also experience that. But everybody's in the same boat. People are like, yesterday I spoke to Johan, and he said like he's one of the best producers in Afrikaans music, and he's at a point where he wants to stop. He wants to stop doing it. So it's not good enough to know that you're good at what you do. That's not good enough. So it's not good enough to know that the industry, your relationships are still there. The only thing that's good enough is to know that you can still do your job the way that it's supposed to be done, because otherwise it's not what it is anymore. So that's what like everybody is feeling. And the mental, like I've had somebody who said,
I think that I think that's why I, for my own good, started to remind myself pros and cons. Try and find the you know, how is this developing our industry, changing our creative sphere for the good? In the midst of this kind of, you know, dark hole that we're in, is try to just find it. And it's not always easy, but that has led to being willing to do new things and different things as well, and kind of explore it.
I think so too, and I've had the same mindset. Even if it means I have to go and plant a few tomatoes and look at them grow and see, oh, here's the eerste een. Here's a tomato, great, I feel good about my day. You know, even if it's got nothing to do with your craft, just do things that keeps you motivated and distracted. Like this program is a freaking distraction for me. You know, it's so enjoyable. It makes it, after this conversation, I'll feel so energetic. I'll probably write my next album within the next 2 days or something like that.
Oh, great.
You know? So yeah, that's the pandemic. Before we go on, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about comedy and the psychology behind it. For you to, I remember that Skalk Besaidnout in the beginning said, you know, the government called him to ask him to make the nation laugh. They literally, you know, asked him, you know, please just do things to make the nation laugh. So we were very, I'll say we, because I mean industry. He was valued enough to be asked by the government to do that. Okay, yet the industry suffered a lot. There wasn't a lot of help from the government. And it's good that we know that there's a government who does offer help and everything. But from previous conversations, I've learned that people don't know, either they don't know how to get that help, or they feel despondent in getting it, or they did, but it was only, it didn't last very long or whatever. Did you apply for any grants? Your union that you belong to, how does that work for you guys in your field?
Well, this is kind of, and a lot of comedians, you know, we're kind of, I wouldn't say left destitute, but left without options, because there isn't a governing body for comedians, you know. And I think the moment that it really hit home for us was the day that Joe Parker called quits on the Monte Casino Club. Wow. You know, and the doors are now indefinitely closed. And I mean, we couldn't perform there for a long time, but I mean, The
Yeah.
moment that happened, that's when the reality of this kind of really struck. And guys like John Vlismus and the like, they were doing really great stuff with the virtual comedy bars and stuff. But it's once again that idea of, telling jokes into a void is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I think people like Skulk and Alfred Adrian really,
Yeah.
really made the most of the opportunity on a daily basis to communicate with people.
Yeah.
And then it's so they adapted to the style of it, like realizing that this screen in front of me is the size that the shot needs to be, and I have to develop some kind of content every day. So they really kind of took it, and I think a few people took a cue from that. But certainly for comedians, there was very, very little, because there is a structured organizational kind of movement for it. I think people were helping each other out and inviting each other on their shows and stuff. In terms of the acting industry, I think we had gotten a lot of support from SAGA, which is basically the actors union. It's affiliated with the majority of our agents as well, and they were working tirelessly, specifically in the course of the last year, to get legislation changed around royalty payments and those kind of things. So it's not necessarily pandemic specific, but it will have a long-term effect on how we are taken care of by the broadcasters and producers.
Yeah.
But in terms of the other grant kind of forms and stuff, I had work, and I realized a lot of people don't have. So I was reticent to apply for kind of the grant stuff, if only because I'm going, look, dude, everybody's struggling, and you've got work for the time being. Once again, with the assumption that it's all going to be over sooner than we think.
Yeah.
I think I was also, none of us were prepared for this. And I, for example, had a bunch of projects coming up, some theater stuff coming up, and a cruise liner gig,
Wow.
which, needless to say, was not going to happen.
Yeah.
And what happened is all of those were either postponed, so they're not cancelled, which meant that the postponement meant that would compromise any kind of grant form that I fill in, because the argument is it's merely postponed. And ultimately they were cancelled, but by that time, we're 12 months into this thing already. And the other thing was, in at least one cases where things had cancelled, the contracts around it had not been issued yet. So I could not prove that this was a contracted job that had been cancelled specifically due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
That just makes me go, okay, there's certain preparations around contracts and stuff that we have to be more kind of
diligent
aware of in future, diligent with, and get those things finalized. You hadn't said yes to a project until it's in black and white. That's a reality that you didn't really consider as important, but it turns out it is important, But for the greater part, and I know some of my friends kind of really did succeed in getting some grant money on the basis of cancelled projects. My agent, Jurgi, at Artist Connection, was also looking after her own by suggesting, if you need help, if you're really, really stuck for grocery money, we are creating a little fund to look after you. Don't be shy to ask. So I do think we saw a lot of welwillendheid, within the industry. That charitable kind of nature of a lot of the artists came forward. People were really actively trying to help you. I do think there were avenues to do it kind of through the government. I know a lot of people waited and never got any reply back. I know of others that, the process was really efficient. And I do think that seeing, for example, Saga kind of working for the actors specifically was really actively trying to kind of contest something that's perhaps a little bit longer term, that's not just, pandemic kind of based, when it looks at things like royalties and the like that, and that exposes previous kind of holes in the system, not ones caused by the pandemic, however, ones definitely elevated,
Yeah, I think that's one of the nicest things, or the most positive things that came about, is people really they were pushed to address things that were wrong already before the pandemic. Yeah, because before the pandemic, things were already difficult. Yeah, yes, I've learned so much from listening to you and seeing what you guys went through as actors and comedians and writers and directors and everything. Yeah, but I get the feeling that your attitude and your mentality it gravitates toward the positive side of things, and that's probably why you're keeping it together well. I think it sounds like it.
Well, I kind of have to, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It reaches a
Yeah,
point where there's no choice.
no.
And perhaps because I did allow that kind of darkness to take over in the course of what is now more than a year and a half, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
um, where, yeah, some weeks were not as positive. Trust me, you know what I
No, no,
mean.
no.
Yeah.
I can see it.
When that insecurity kicks in, that wasn't pleasant. But then you go, well, no, there's no choice anymore. You know, it's either
That's it.
that or, you know, it'll affect the rest of my life. Then,
That's
you
it.
know, but that's
Mm,
perhaps one of the problems. And I always kind of have to remind myself, if I think my industry suffered,
mm,
or the arts suffered, and I'm going to be very careful in how I phrase this,
mm.
but there was a point where I was getting a little frustrated at artists really voicing how unfair this has been on them and open up the theaters and stuff. And I'm going, no, you guys don't understand.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
affecting everybody and
Everybody.
everybody's business.
Yeah,
And B, for you to jump on your high horse is not going to let this pass quicker. If
that's
you
it.
absolutely insist that we have theaters at full capacity,
Yeah,
you're just contributing to, you know, like I
exactly.
had a point where I was going, stop feeling so sorry for yourself.
Mm,
Literally everybody is suffering through this. Now, I know
yeah,
as artists, we often have this kind of emotional reaction to things,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
or as entertainers.
Mm,
But this is not, without being me, this is not the time for it to some extent,
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah. I totally
Um,
get that. Mm,
so that was a big thing in getting me to just stay a little bit more positive, is this realization that it is literally everybody has lost their, you know, people have lost businesses,
mm,
people have lost friends due to the pandemic, and family members physically, you know,
yes,
people have lost their own health as a result of this,
that's it.
you know.
Mm,
Sometimes, you know, it's about doing the job for what I've always believed art is intended, is to heal humanity, you know,
mm,
not just for the fact to get paid for it. But the dilemma is,
absolutely.
my landlord is not going to, you know, say, okay, you know what, skip rent this month, just come tell me a few jokes and then we sort it. So
Exactly.
so I do understand that weighing of things, but I do
Yeah.
feel that in some capacity, how we direct our emotional reaction to this is
Mm,
going to determine what we create next as well. So rather, let's take it towards the positive rather than the embittered, you know.
yeah, I think so. And I think a difficult but sensible way of doing that is perhaps to put focus away from this is my art, I have to do this, otherwise I don't have any worth, and otherwise I don't get money.
Mm.
Sometimes we actually need to leave that thing behind a little bit and try other stuff and realize, this is not as important to everybody else as I think it is. It's important to
I
me,
think it
but
is, yeah.
yeah, let me just try other things, other ways
And
of,
and
yeah.
perhaps that saddens me to realize that once again, that condition or people's valuation of the arts was, there was a problem with that before the pandemic hit as well. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to kind of think that theaters didn't struggle before the pandemic is naive. To
Mm,
think that, you know, cinemas were making less revenue. I mean, you know, it's still related, you know,
mm,
but the move towards home entertainment, which I kind of obviously welcome as well in the same
yeah.
breath. But, you
Yeah.
know, to think that everything was hunky dory in the arts before the pandemic
No,
is very naive. You know what I mean? It's like I still
exactly.
got dicked out of money by club owners at stand-up comedy gigs. You
Oh
know,
yeah. Oh
um,
yeah.
I
How can it?
still, you know, had people, you know, promise things that they didn't deliver on. I still saw festival shows where it's no longer financially viable to take a big cast to a festival because you're not going to make your money back. So you have to do a 2 or a 3-hander at most, maybe 5 cast members. Otherwise, it's going to be, the days of big theatre was over already, or not over. It was certainly under threat, even before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
And now that sounds pessimistic, but maybe that's where I'm trying to get my positive. Is like there were chinks in the armor beforehand. So let's try and fix what we can fix now.
That's it.
And then see if we can get it healthy again.
Yeah. And that's what I enjoy so much about these little talks that I'm having, is that some people feel very doomed and gloomed about it, which is completely legit. Some people have the different viewpoints that come out of it. Most importantly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's important to hear this. It was already a problem before the pandemic. Now we're highlighting stuff that needs to be fixed urgently because people's livelihoods and lives depend on it. Literally
depend on it.
So Hannes, it was so nice chatting to you.
Same here.
Yes. Hey. I want to ask you. Last question is, what value do you see in having conversations like this, candid conversations about the industry? What value do you see it for yourself, for others in the industry, for young people? Yeah.
Well, once again, because we kind of touched it earlier, it's like now that I teach a little bit and then rediscovering the basics of acting and performance, because I'm literally telling and I mean I have so much empathy for students studying performing arts at the moment, because you can't act over a Zoom, what I mean? And this is no disrespect to the students. I think they're incredibly talented, all of them. But it's like they're scared of each other in the sense that, they're not used to that kind of communication, in a space, listening to each other, reacting. And so I want to link that with these kind of conversations, because it is listening and reacting as well for the viewer that's going to see this, and for other artists that might disagree with my point of view on everything. It opens up a conversation which entails, not only a giving but a sharing, and a taking from someone else. It's a listening process. That's the merit of it. And like I said, I mean, we just established, some of the things that we are concerned about in the arts industry may have been kind of pre-existing, and the idea that we can now actually maybe that's the time we take now, is figure out what was wrong in any case and try to fix that. And that's the merit of this kind of conversation. Absolutely. And I love talking about my work. I do. Because if I talk about what I've done and what I do and listen to what other people do and have done, it kind of it fills my creative spirit a little bit as well. It gives me an opportunity to justify beyond just the joke that you see on stage, to actually what is it reinforces my love for it perhaps a little bit, to get to talk about it. And I always think that in any performance, if you're being directed by someone, or if you have a band leader or whatever, you get notes afterwards. Those notes are constructive kind of criticisms to help you do it better and better. So any discussion like this, I almost view as a note session of how I approach this industry. If I can learn something from it, if I can re-emphasize something for myself, then that is valuable. It's then I'm being directed, by something greater than myself towards becoming better, and that's great.
Yes, that is just that is such a beautiful way of saying it. Dit klink amazing. Ons moet daai neerskryf. We have to write it down, please. Ek gaan alles transcribe wat jy gesê het.
Because these pills usually only in 10 minutes they're gone.
Exactly.
Thought even. So, thank goodness you recorded it.
Yes, see. Once again, thank you so much for chatting. It was lekker om jou te sien, and I hope the viewers enjoyed this and will watch the other episodes follow you with your work.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. I think
it's a pleasure.
Maybe the artists that you've spoken to, some of them, and I include myself, just being able to get it off your chest is therapeutic enough, That's great. That feels good.
Ja.
kind of go, wow, this is how it was for me. So thank you for doing this. It's important work, already. Important work.
Alles kom uit in die stort, Hannes. Kyk, ons kan die warm water
Dis
warm
waar.
oopdraai. You can turn out the hot water,
ja.
but sometimes you have to go, oh, nee, wag, is te warm. Whatever the case may be. Yeah. Okay, well, enjoy the rest of your day and good luck with everything that you're busy with.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Lorraine.
Cheers.